Hi, I'm Elizabeth. What does it mean to eat well? I'm using air quotes there because I don't think eating well means what we think it means most of the time. I'm just going to start by saying that I talk about food and eating well and nutrition a lot, like maybe an annoying amount to the people that are around me on a regular basis. But the reality is that the food that we eat has such an impact on our energy and how we sleep and how we feel and our health and so many other things. So the food that we eat is actually really, really important. But I think this idea that we all know that we need to, again, air quotes, eat well. But what does that mean? Because there's no real definition of it. And I think also another important thing to add there is that eating well doesn't mean you're eating perfectly 100% of the time. I think a lot of us put this expectation that we need to be only eating salads and chicken breasts, and that's the only thing that we're allowed to have because that is the best food. Again, more air quotes. And so I just want to clarify a few things about what does it mean to eat well. And I'm going to share with you the 6 principles I use in my life to guide what foods I'm eating, what foods I'm feeding my family, and how to make it work really today. Principle number 1 is actually a quote by Michael Pollan, which is eat real foods, not too much, mostly plants. I think that's just an incredible basic principle to get us started. So eat real foods. You want to be focusing on real whole foods, mostly that you're preparing yourselves, that you know the ingredients of. That is the baseline for that. Mostly plants. I really like that phrase because it acknowledges the fact that not everybody is a vegetarian or a vegan. Lots of people are omnivores. So it's okay to have, when he says mostly plants, it's not exclusively plants, but also that we should be focusing a lot on plants. So on the vegetables and the fruits, but also on the plant-based proteins. And not too much is an interesting one too, because the quantity of food that we eat it's high. North America especially, not globally, but in North America, we eat way more food than we need. And there's actually a lot of research to show that when you keep your food and your caloric intake kind of on the lower end of what you need, I'm not talking starvation, not at all am I talking starvation, but when you keep your food intake more on the lower end, it actually increases your longevity. So you're more likely to live longer and healthier when you eat less. So that is one of my primary guiding principles. Principle number 2 for me is what my plate looks like when I build it. So you want your plate to be roughly half veggies, okay? You want to have, and veggies of all different colors. So as many different colors as you can have in the day. You want to have a serving of protein. Now, a serving here, I don't base on the plate itself, I base on my hand. So a serving of protein is about the same size and thickness of the palm of your hand. That's protein. And that again should be animal protein once in a while, plant protein also equally, if not more. Whole grains as part of your meal, again, based on a serving size, based on your anatomy, on the size of the palm of your hand. So one serving is about the size of a cupped hand's worth. So a whole grain and then some healthy fat at a meal, which is going to be about the size of your thumb. So it's about 1 to 2 tablespoons of healthy fat. So raw nuts and seeds, avocados, fatty fish is healthy fat, olive oil, that kind of thing. So when I look at that and kind of build my meals that way, it changes drastically from what we often see in North America. So if you were to go out for a meal, you might find heaping piles of rice, a couple pieces of vegetables, and a big chicken breast. This is an example. So really kind of rejigging that to be veggies as the primary focus, and then basing your serving size on your anatomy. Because if you're someone who's a bit on the larger side, you're going to have a bigger palm, you're going to need more protein. If you're someone who's on the smaller, more petite side, you're going to have a smaller palm, you're just going to need less protein. So that is principle number 2 that I like to follow. Principle number 3 is that culture is really important. So again, in North America, we have this idea that a salad plus a chicken breast is like the best meal possible. And yes, chicken and salad is wonderfully healthy, but that is a very North American centric idea. And when we use the first 2 principles, right, eating real food, eating mostly plants, not eating too much, having lots of veggies, having a reasonable portion size, we can actually use those principles to fit into whatever culture you are a part of. So different cultures have different emphasis on different foods, different spices, and different ways of eating, and all of that is actually really, really important. if your culture is, does a lot of like vegetarian proteins, and you're coming into a North American idea that we need to have chicken breast every day, well, that's probably not actually going to make you feel great. And it's probably not actually going to be optimal for your body. So eating what your culture tells you or dictates, and the foods that you like, the foods that you grew up with, is actually, and I'm air quoting again here, eating well, but I mean that sincerely. So eat what your culture suggests that you should be eating, would like to be eating, follow your culture, and I guarantee that your body will thrive when you do that. Principle number 4 is the 80-20 rule. So I mentioned this at the top, but it is really, really important that focusing on eating well is not the only thing we focus on. Because yes, while I do try to, eat well and feed myself good foods and feed myself food that I enjoy and that makes me feel good most of the time, I actually love treats. So I love cookies, I love ice cream, I love chocolate, I love chips, I love salty things. I love all of those things. Now, when I base my diet on chips and cookies and ice cream, I don't feel well. I feel sluggish. I feel tired. Not that I do this often, but I feel lethargic. I just don't feel well. When I base my diet on mostly whole foods, good protein, good grains, good fats, I can have, a cookie or a treat or something once in a while and still feel great. And that is a really good balance for everybody to find, because I love those things and I really want to enjoy them. And so when I feel like having them, I eat them and I enjoy them. I savor them. I enjoy them. They're wonderful. And then I go back to whatever it was that I was eating. The more, I'll say, treats that we eat, the more treats we want. And that is true. So when I get on a pattern or a habit of eating sugar every day, like let's say that you get into the habit of eating a sweet, after your meal in the evening, I do that once in a while. I have to really consciously catch myself to take myself out of that pattern, because it's really easy for me to just keep wanting that because it becomes a habit. So when we eat foods routinely, we tend to want foods routinely. So being aware of that. But this 80-20 rule is one that I live by for sure. So I can actually enjoy myself, because life is short and food is delicious, and food is meant to be enjoyed as much as it's meant to be a fuel. It's also meant to be enjoyed. Principle number 5 comes back to this idea of actually food sensitivities. So when I say food sensitivities, I'm going to have to do a separate thing on this because it's a whole big topic in and of itself. But different food affects people in different ways. I'm going to use lactose intolerance as an example. It is not a food sensitivity. It's different process. But with lactose intolerance, what happens is that some people who don't have a problem with lactose can have dairy and cheese and ice cream and milk and all sorts, like all of the dairy that they want, and feel fine. But if you have lactose intolerance, even a little bit of cheese or dairy or whatever can make you feel sick. And there's a whole range of symptoms that you might experience. But it's important. What's important here is that how dairy makes one person feel is completely different from the next person. Totally different mechanism, but food sensitivities are very similar. So I was working with a woman one time who came in and she had really severe nausea and vomiting, and she couldn't figure out what was going on. We played around with different foods. It turned out that potatoes was a big trigger for her. I myself had really bad eczema on my hands, and I had a number of food triggers, but one of them was almonds. Almonds are an incredibly healthy food. I recommend them all the time to people. Almonds are great, but they're not good for me. And so when you hear about all these foods that are supposed to be so good and so healthy, that's wonderful. But if they don't make you feel good, then that's not eating well for yourself. So listen to your body, listen to the foods that make you feel good and that you feel, even if they're healthy foods, right? I don't eat a lot of almonds because they don't make me feel good. So eating foods that make you feel optimal is eating well. And my last principle, that again, this is a whole really big topic that deserves its own separate video at some point, is this idea of intuitive and mindful eating. So I'm going to sum this up to say that eating mindfully, eating intuitively means you're really paying attention to the signals that your body is sending. You're really paying attention to your hunger and your satiety and your cravings. That's a big one too. You're really paying attention to how you feel when you eat, and you're really listening to your cues. You're really savoring your foods and enjoying them. So eating in that way, this takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of self-awareness, but it's a really, really powerful tool around food. And it's a very important part of, there's my air quotes again, eating well. So eating mindfully and kind of using intuitive eating patterns, which I'll do a separate dive into those another day. That is a huge part of eating well. Eating well is not just something that you do automatically. It's a process. It's involved. There's planning involved. It takes some work. It takes some training, and it takes a lot of self-awareness. But at the end of the day, the goal is to eat so that you feel energized and optimal and happy and healthy and incredible and wonderful and nourished, but that you're also enjoying it, because like I said, life is short and eating is meant to be enjoyable as well. It does take some practice, but with some work and some guidance, you can get there. And if you're someone who isn't sure if you're eating well, but you're definitely sure that you're not sleeping well, hop on a call with me. We have a lot to chat about. I can help get you started and set you up with some resources that are going to get you in the right direction. I'll put the link in the description below. Please let me know if you have any questions, any thoughts, if there's anything that you like to follow when it comes to, there's my air quotes again, eating well. And I hope you have a great day.